Thank you very
Thanks so
much. Thank you. Hi everyone and welcome. My name is Pete Cruz. I'm joined by Jeff Jones from Ticketmaster. And we're excited to be here today to kind of talk to you about cloud automation and what Ticketmaster has kind of done and their best practices and kind of evolving and centralizing automation to help drive business value. First, when we talk about cloud automation, to set a little bit of a stage, we talk about it more in the context of much broader than just provisioning and the retirement of resources in the cloud. As an organization, our customers are really trying to figure out how do they orchestrate that cloud environment and the resources that are needed to deliver services with the other services outside of cloud, whether it's network, security, systems of record, IT service management tooling. And they leverage Ansible automation platform to do those types of things. They need to operationalize after they provision. They need to work with those day two operations, configuration, start and stop, updates, add moves, changes, deletes, troubleshooting if things go sideways in the environment. How do they quickly gather facts and drive those forward? And then to be able to govern, to be able to ensure that the things that we're doing and putting into cloud and putting in production are aligned with the standards, whether it's your corporate standards, regulatory standards, if you're in retail or financial services, et cetera. And so folks like Ticketmaster are trying to look at this more holistically than just about putting things in the cloud and taking them out of the cloud. So to kind of start off, Jeff, I think as we look at what Ticketmaster has done, what were the goals that you set out for and what were some of the challenges you face in kind of building automation within the environment?
Yeah, so we had a challenge of working with teams across various parts of our organization, various skill levels, from operations teams running legacy technology stacks to teams working on the cutting edge of the latest and greatest DevOps tools and everything in between. So these teams, they've developed their own automation over the years. They've had different efforts going on, but we needed a way to share automation, especially in a way that empowered those teams that were maintaining some of our aging systems to bring them up to speed and get them using some of these newer technologies. So here, when we talk about democratizing the automation, we're talking about making it available to everybody, regardless of their skill level or the team they support. So I want to take us through example that I saw with my teams here, and I've seen at other companies that I've been with, of a team who is just feeling overwhelmed by this constant treadmill of keeping aging systems running, patched, up to date, compliant, and also having new things thrown at them while they're on the treadmill. Their tools are being deprecated, they have to adopt something new, whatever it may be. So when we think of a team like that, then they often will say, we're treading water, we can barely keep our head above water, how are we ever going to make a dent in things? And that's where we'll start our story with a team like that. They're going to hire somebody like a site reliability engineer, because we all know SREs are supposed to save the day, right? That's the latest, greatest thing. So they're going to hire an SRE. That SRE is going to come in on day one, but probably nothing changed from the time the team interviewed him till now. So they're going to start, they're going to get some ancient onboarding document, try to click on links to a wiki that's 10 years out of date, and just get crickets when they start, because the team really is pretty busy. You get handed from person to person. So if you're in that situation, you have a new hire, or you've pulled someone out of the day-to-day to try to make a dent in the mountain of tech debt, what can you do? And this is where you start with one curious engineer who's not afraid to just start talking to people. Throw meetings on their calendars and say, tell me about what you do. I have a list of 5 questions, can we jump through it? Or can I shadow you for a couple hours? When you start with an engineer like that who does that, then you are able to create a list of opportunities and share those with the team. The important thing is you're starting right away, talking to people, recording those opportunities, and sharing them.
Excellent, excellent. So as you start looking at those goals and some of the challenges that you face, as you start to really kind of build automation as a kind of a practice or as a culture within the organization, so what are some of the best practices you can share with everybody to kind of say, okay, these are the things that we should think about and the things that we should implement as you get started?
Yeah, so if we keep going with that same team, that same example, as you have those opportunities you've recorded, now you have to figure out a way to put them into place. And you want a quick win, you're going to use something like, write a bash script, write a Python script, change the systemd unit file. So you restart a system that's been, a service that's been crashing. Quick wins to the team that show that, hey, I'm here to help, but you're quickly going to find that if that's what you're doing, you're just doing the same thing that's always been done. We got years and or decades of scripts and tools that are around to do exactly what you're doing, but they haven't been shared effectively, and that's because of the roadblock that sharing automation is. You click a button, or you type a command to the command line, and then you just pray it's doing what you think it's doing. And maybe you know how to read the script that you're looking at, maybe you don't. Maybe nobody's touched Perl for 10 years, but the script's in Perl. So these opportunities, this presents an opportunity then to kind of start over with something simple. And that's where my team, we found Ansible as something super simple, reads almost like English in its syntax. It's written in YAML files, and when you run it, it spits out to the screen, out to the console, exactly what it's doing and what it's touching. And that gets over the roadblock right away of, all right, you gave me this tool, but I don't know what it's doing, I'm afraid to use it, I'm nervous about using it. And so as you start to do that and share, you're going to find that people are really interested in this new easy-to-read format. They're interested in it because they're seeing success that you're having and others, and you start to get this snowball effect that's basically due just to the easy to read and easy to share nature of the Ansible code and syntax.
Cool. And then to kind of keep that going, right? So what are some of the successes that you've had in bringing other folks along?
Yeah. So to continue on this path and get that snowball effect to grow, we have to follow these 3 tenets that we have here. That the automation needs to be readable, it needs to be shareable, and it needs to be maintainable. So we touched on readability a little bit already. People need to be able to know what it does. But shareable, they need a way to run it easily. If we're passing files around and things, it gets complicated. But if we have it centralized in source control, and we can pull them to a central box, that's better. If we get to the point that we have a user interface that's easy to use, that people are comfortable with, you're going to expand your user base even more to some of those legacy teams that are running tech. Maybe they're system administrators, comfortable experts in what they do, but not in some of these other things. But now with a user interface like this, you're able to give them confidence to use the things you've been writing. And so that's the shareability portion, a way to easily use it, a way to easily see it in source control and share it across teams. And this is where my team, we turn to the Ansible automation platform, but we use the upstream version at first, the open source version called AWS. And quickly that became just instrumental to what our team does. And we used it all the time, but we found that it could also create its own kind of toil maintaining a tool like that. All the configuration, all the options, users jumping in and changing settings. And at one point we had to redeploy it because of a VM issue, and it took us a day or two to get it all back to how we needed it. So we adopted the principles of configuration as code and infrastructure as code, so that when you're configuring Ansible automation platform, you can have your configuration in a repo, and then you can use an Ansible playbook to configure the entire tool set for you, so that in just a matter of minutes, the times to take to deploy the software and run the playbook, you're able to configure it and be up and running.
Excellent. And so keeping it going, right? So I think as we think about, as now you moved into the downstream and the Ansible automation platform to kind of help solve some of those, alleviate you from becoming the automation becoming the toil. So some thoughts about how to keep that going?
Yeah. So as you're kind of building this critical mass of people, you're going to now have the responsibility of sharing the automation across teams. You're going to want to be really focusing on teaching others and helping others with those guidelines that we talked about earlier of readability, maintainability, and shareability. Focusing on easy to read playbooks has just been the foundation of what we've been able to be successful with. Every time we deviate from that and the playbooks start to get convoluted and you jump from place to place, it gets messy, it doesn't work as well. But focusing on simplicity drives that adoption. And so as you get to that point where now you do have that critical mass of users, you're going to be supporting systems in production. You have production dependencies, that now you went from this handy tool that your operations team was using to something that production services rely on every day. And with all of that, then comes the realities of operating in a modern tech workspace, of needing to comply with regulations and security requirements, meeting with auditors and all of those types of things. Fortunately for us, we found that the ability to have role-based access controls and authentication integrated with our LDAP system, it took care of a lot of those audit requirements right out of the box. And then security and keeping things patched was definitely a chore for us when we were on the open source version, of just kind of that treadmill of all the dependencies, keeping them up to date. And it was definitely something we were able to do and able to keep up with, but ultimately decided to make that move to the cloud, to essentially outsource that to Red Hat and let our team focus on the automation that we want to work on.
Excellent.
So.
No, that was great. I think the story that you talked about, the challenges that you face, a lot of organizations that we deal with on a regular basis face those challenges, and they use Ansible, the automation platform, to really, for some key reasons, right? One is to increase the speed, right? You're trying to move your business forward. You're trying to react to things that are happening in the market, what's happening with your users, with your customers. So you want to increase the speed. You can't be bogged down with the manual intervention to everything that needs to be touched and worked on in the environment, and then reduce the human error. Sometimes a configuration and setting up a network interface, one fat finger and now the network's down, right? You can do some damage if you're doing that manually. So by being able to have that, as you mentioned, right, that recorded, repeatable set of workflows for doing automation, it's consistent and it's reliable. And that's kind of that last point, ensuring consistency in what you're doing in your environment to make sure that what you're putting out there, what you're deploying is in line with your corporate standards, with your policies, right? And what operations needs to know to make sure that when things go into production, they have understanding of how it was configured and how it was deployed. So how do you get Ansible, right? There's multiple ways to deploy Ansible. You can deploy it in your data center, you can deploy it in your cloud account, you can get it from Red Hat, but you can also get it through the AWS Marketplace. So if you already have an AWS cloud account, you can use the AWS Marketplace to acquire Ansible automation platform to bring it into your environment. Some of the benefits for you is using the platform, and a lot of them Jeff touched on for his organization, as far as moving from that open source up into a supported platform that has the capabilities to move forward. Right? It runs in, you can deploy it in your cloud, whether it's on EC2 instances or you want to deploy it in ROSA, the Red Hat OpenShift service on AWS. It includes a certified collection, so it's a certified collection we engineer and work with. Our developers work with AWS developers to build the collection, so and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But everything that you want to be able to automate within AWS, you can use through the certified collection. It's supported by Red Hat. It's integrated to AWS billing, and it also counts, if you have committed spend agreements, it counts towards those committed spend environments. In addition to those benefits, it's not just Ansible for AWS, right? You can use Ansible to automate your enterprise, right? Whether it's your cloud resources inside of AWS, in your data center, or in your cloud, whether it's cloud native, whether it's your data center, et cetera, whether it's network and security, use cases, IT service management tie-in, if you're using a product like ServiceNow as an example, basically updating those systems of record as I deploy and configure resources. I can update systems of record and monitoring tools to say this is what the LAN looks like now, or even if you see something that's going on with our event-driven automation capabilities, see an event in your monitoring tools, you can leverage Ansible and automation to actually remediate or re-provision or do configuration changes. And that certified collection for AWS, what that means is it has all of the roles, all of the modules, all of the playbooks and the pieces that you need to actually do automation within your AWS environment. And we have over 150 certified collections across a number of different vendors. If you come over to the booth, we can talk through a lot of those other use cases. But it really helps simplify the automation within your AWS account. And as Jeff mentioned, it's human readable format, it's consistent, it's easy to read, it's easy to get up to speed on. But again, you just see some of a piece of some of the other collections that are in that tool to get you started, to be able to get you automating as quickly as possible. Now, if you want to learn more, if you want to get your hands on it, we have Ansible automation labs. You can go to that site. You can register. They have all kinds of use cases across cloud, across network, across security, across infrastructure. We have some other materials. You can also take training. You know, there's training available for customers and for users, and there's a certification course if you want to go through and get certified. And we're right over here, the Red Hat booth's right behind us. Please visit us there. We'll be doing some mini theater talks around cloud automation. We're going to be going a little bit deeper into that life cycle that I showed at the beginning of the presentation. So please feel free to come by, learn more, meet with some of the team. Some of the team is in the back here. So look forward to meeting everyone. And we have some time, I think, left, a couple minutes for some questions.
Okay.